The Entangled Rope, written and read by Nabeel Athar. The lifeboat in that rough sea was rolling like an intoxicated tramp in the midst of a highway. The oars had been heaved into the boat a long time ago, as they were of no help. The heaving rope, still stuck into the propeller, had stopped the propeller completely from turning, thus forcing the crew to shut off the engines. The crew of those 7 men were holding tight to their seats inside the boat. The evident anxiety of these men was rising every rising wave of the sea. That that July afternoon was experiencing the usual monsoon weather, cloudy, humid, noisy, and windy. It seemed all fine only a few hours ago when the captain of that old ship called Karatua ordered lowering of that boat for the purpose of a trading short sail to the shores of Kuwada, a remote coastal town of southern Punjab, Pakistan. The sea seemed calmer and the wind was normal. The captain must have checked the weather from his radio officer before asking his second mate to lower the lifeboat, along with those other 7 young men. Old man should have thought it through, the second mate thought, and shook his head with worry. He was desperately trying to hold on to his composure and to hide his fear from the rest of his crew members. He was in charge of that boat. That was the only hope of survival in the vastness of that angry sea, ready to swallow everything floating on it. The ship Karatua was anchored almost 4 nautical miles away from the shores of Kavada. It was only a few days ago it had sailed from Karachi, carrying 10,000 tons of wheat. Beyond its present anchored position, it was dangerous for the ship to sail further towards the shore due to the uncertain, uncharted depth of that part of the Arabian Sea. The captain decided to drop the anchor at a relatively safe distance from the shores. The local barges had come alongside the ship and were moored into the ship. The vessel's derricks were being used to unload the cargo consisting of jute, gunny sacks. Because of the monsoon weather, holes were frequently closed to avoid rainfall into the holes, and the progress of unloading had become excruciatingly slow. That day of July in the year 1978 was one such day when all cargo handling was stopped due to an unexpected downpour of monsoon rain. That is why Captain Mukhtar started thinking of a way of keeping his staff busy at work. And what could have been a better way than the practical training of those few cadets under the leadership of his second mate? A formidable high wave rose the boat alarmingly, which banged onto the sea with intensity and jolted everyone inside the boat. By the time all crew members of the boat had completely drenched with sea water and shivering due to a moist, chilly wind, the anxiety among the crew was being gradually replaced with their fear. Though they had their life jackets on and holding tight to their seats, they knew that the only way they could survive in this rough weather and from the shark-infested sea was being inside the boat. And if the boat could take them to the anchored ship, they thought. When they started towards the shore a few hours ago, a canoe or sampan carrying a custom official who had visited the ship to fulfill the formalities was leaving for the shore too. It was about the same time when the lifeboat was lowered. The sampanwala, the boatman, noticed a sizable propeller of the boat and must have thought of lifeboat's engine relative strength versus his own boat's one. And he humbly asked the second officer, who commanded the lifeboat, to tow him towards the shore and as far as possible. The second mate, who was in his mid-20s, was a very agreeable and obliging man. He could not refuse the request of a much older boatwala. A lowering rope was passed on to the sampan, where the sampanwala tied it. The lifeboat towed the sampan, which was carrying the sampanwala and the custom officer. The lifeboat must have towed the sampan for about half an hour, when all of a sudden sampanwala, without warning, let go the rope. When the rope slackened, it caught into the propeller, and the engine stopped. By the time the lifeboat stopped, Sampan had gone too far away. The second officer and his boat crew shout out for Sampan, but to no avail. The opposing wind won't let their voices reach Sampan or the only passenger who was too sick to notice any voice anyway. That had happened several hours ago. In these few hours, the sea had become infuriated, and the waves had been rising by the minute. The weather was getting cloudier and the scene darker, and so were the faces of the crew, who had now started losing hope. Nabeel was not one of the crew members. At one of the troughs of the wave, he thought if somehow he could lower himself into the sea and try disentangling the heaving rope off the propeller, that might solve the problem. The boat would start and might take all of us to the ship. He shared his thought with the second officer, who at first did not appreciate it much, but it seemed there was no other way. On Nabeel's insistence, he finally agreed. A line was tied around Nabeel's waist. His life jacket was carefully inspected during the midst of the rolling and pitching. That was not easy. The crew who helped Nabeel was holding tight to their seats with one hand, and with the other they carried on with the testing and tying the rope around his waist. The second officer nodded to give him the permission to get into the water. In the noisy sea, he was shouting through his lungs to give instructions. "Slowly," he shouted. "Just hold on to the line," he shouted again. "Let go. Easy," he shouted again. Nabeel inched towards the rear of the boat and in the process rolled from side to side. He waited for the boat to rise, and while it dropped at the waning wave, he jumped into the water. The first thing he noticed while being into the water was a total different perspective of the sea. The waves did not seem scary anymore. His fear had disappeared. He only had one thing in mind: to disentangle the propeller. He heaved on to the line that was tied to his waist to come closer to the rear of the boat. As soon as he was nearer, a wave thrashed his forehead into the propeller blade. The burning sensation at his forehead made him realize his open wound reacted to the salty water. He ignored the burn and got hold of the propeller. He had to have a working distance from the propeller to avoid further collision into it. The second officer inside the boat realized that. He asked one of the oars to be used to keep Nabeel from colliding again into the propeller blades. His technique worked. Nabeel tied, cutting off the rope using a sea knife. But the rope had swelled into a formidable thick mass that could not be cut without a mechanical cutter. He then resorted to disentangle the rope with his bare hands rather than cutting it. The minutes seemed hours. His blood oozing out from his forehead was now getting into his eyes. The excruciating burning sensation was intolerable. But he knew that the disentangling job was to save his and his fellow crew members' lives. He went on and on. The grip of the rope was finally loosening. At that very moment, the second officer noticed the fins of the shark, which smelled the blood in the water. They had started circling the boat. The waves had subsided a little, but the new danger seemed much more formidable. He shouted at Nabeel to be ready to be pulled in. Nabeel was too busy loosening the entangled rope around the propeller that he did not listen. His strives had just started to show the signs of some progress. It was just a matter of time that he would disentangle everything, he thought. At that very moment, he felt the twitch and the jerk which was caused due to the second officer's efforts of pulling the line tight into Nabeel's waist to notify him of the looming danger of the hovering sharks. Nabeel's concentration was on the rope. He had lost every count of that time and place. He was to disentangle the rope. That was the only thing in his mind. At that moment, the shark rapidly swam towards Nabeel to attack him. But the second officer and his crew were ready with another oar. They struck the shark with the oar. The shark did not expect the oar attack. It swam away, but the remaining sharks kept on hovering around the boat. It was the last turn Nabeel gave to the rope to clear the propeller from the rope when the sharks decided to attack him together. But all the crew members first pulled the line, and then with all their strength they pulled Nabeel into the boat, who lost his consciousness as soon as he hit the floor of the boat. The day had darkened, but the young crewman's eyes had brightened as soon as the engine of the boat started.